82. The Three Sisters. Once upon a time, there was a rich king who was so wealthy that he believed his riches could never run out. He lived in luxury, playing on a golden board with silver skittles. But after some time, his wealth began to decline. He pawned one city and castle after another, until only an old castle in the woods remained. There he lived with the queen and their three princesses, struggling to get by with nothing but potatoes, which they ate every day. One day, the king decided to go hunting, hoping to shoot a hare. He filled his pockets with potatoes and ventured into a nearby large forest. This forest was feared by all because terrible things were said to happen there. Bears that would devour people, eagles that would peck out eyes, wolves, lions, and all kinds of cruel creatures. But the king wasn't afraid at all and walked straight in. At first, he saw nothing but tall, mighty trees, and everything was quiet underneath them. After wandering around for a while and becoming hungry, he sat down under a tree to eat his potatoes. Suddenly, a bear emerged from the thicket, approached him, and growled, "How dare you sit by my honey tree? You'll pay dearly for this." The king was frightened and offered the bear his potatoes, trying to appease it. But the bear started speaking and said, "I don't want your potatoes. I want to eat you, and you can only save yourself by giving me your eldest daughter. If you do that, I'll also give you 100 weight of gold." Trembling at the thought of being eaten, the king agreed and said, "You shall have her. Just leave me in peace." The bear then showed him the way out and growled, "I'll come in 7 days to fetch my bride." The king returned home bravely, thinking that surely the bear couldn't crawl through a keyhole, and he made sure everything was securely locked. He raised all the drawbridges and told his daughter to keep up her spirits. To keep her safe from the bear bridegroom, he hid her in a small room high up under the battlements, where she remained hidden until the 7 days were up. On the seventh morning, very early while everyone was still asleep, a magnificent carriage drawn by 6 horses and surrounded by many riders dressed in gold arrived at the castle. As it approached, the drawbridges lowered by themselves and the locks sprang open without keys. The carriage entered the courtyard, and a young, handsome prince stepped out. The king woke up to the noise, looked out the window, and saw the prince taking his eldest daughter from the locked room and lifting her into the carriage. All he could do was call after her, "Farewell, dear maiden fair. Go, bear's bride, go where?" She waved her white handkerchief at him from the carriage, and then they sped away as if the wind had been harnessed, deeper into the enchanted forest. The king, however, was heavy-hearted to have given his daughter to a bear, and for 3 days he wept with the queen, so sorrowful was he. But on the 4th day, after he had cried his fill, he thought, "What's done is done, and cannot be changed." He descended into the courtyard, where there stood a chest of ebony, incredibly heavy to lift. Remembering what the bear had promised him, he opened it to find 100 weight of gold, shimmering and gleaming. When the king saw the gold, he was comforted and redeemed his cities and kingdom, resuming his former life of luxury. This lasted as long as the 100 weight of gold lasted. After that, he had to pawn everything again and return to the forest castle, eating potatoes once more. The king had a falcon that he took with him one day into the fields to hunt, hoping for something better to eat. The falcon soared up and flew towards the dark, enchanted forest, where the king dared not venture again. But as soon as it reached there, an eagle swooped out and chased the falcon back to the king. The king tried to fend off the eagle with his spear, but the eagle seized the spear and broke it like a reed. Then it crushed the falcon with a talon and slashed at the king's shoulder, saying, "Why do you disturb my realm of the air? For this you shall die, or you shall give me your second daughter in marriage." The king replied, "Yes, you shall have her, but what will you give me in return?" 200 weight of gold," said the eagle, "and in 7 weeks I will come to fetch her." With that, he released the king and flew off into the forest. The king was distraught to have sold his second daughter to a wild animal and dared not tell her anything about it. 6 weeks passed, and on the 7th, the princess went out to a lawn in front of the castle to water her linen. Suddenly, a magnificent procession of handsome knights arrived, with the most beautiful among them riding at the front. He dismounted and called out, "Hurry, hurry, maiden fair, come with me, beautiful eagle bride." Before she could reply, he had already lifted her onto his horse and galloped with her into the forest, like a bird taking flight. "Farewell! Farewell!" rang out from the castle. They waited a long time for the princess to return, but she did not come. Finally, the king realized that in his desperation, he had promised her to an eagle, and the eagle had come to claim her. When the king's sadness had eased a little, he remembered the eagle's promise and descended to the lawn where he found 2 golden eggs, each weighing 100 weight. "Whoever has gold is pious enough," he thought, and banished all his heavy thoughts from his mind. Thus, the merry life began anew and lasted until the 200 weight of gold were also spent. Then the king returned once more to the forest castle, and the remaining princess had to boil the potatoes. The king no longer wished to hunt hares in the forest or birds in the air, but he enjoyed eating fish. So the princess had to knit a net, and he went to a pond not far from the forest. There was a boat on it, so he got in and cast the net. He caught a lot of beautiful red-spotted trout in one throw. But as he tried to bring them ashore, the boat became stuck, and he couldn't free it no matter how hard he tried. Suddenly, a gigantic whale appeared and snorted, "Why are you stealing my subjects? This shall cost you your life." With that, he opened his enormous mouth as if to swallow the king and the boat whole. Terrified by the dreadful mouth before him, the king lost all courage. Then he remembered his third daughter and cried out, "Spare my life, and you shall have my youngest daughter." "So be it," growled the whale. "I will also give you something in return. I have no use for gold. It's too common for me, but the bottom of my lake is paved with pearl shells. I will give you 3 sacks full of them. In the 7th moon, I will come to fetch my bride." Then he dove under the water. The king rowed back to shore and brought his trout home. But when they were cooked, he couldn't bring himself to eat any of them. Whenever he looked at his daughter, the only one left to him, the most beautiful and beloved of them all, it felt as though 1,000 knives were piercing his heart. 6 months passed, and the queen and princess didn't know what was troubling the king, who hadn't shown a happy face during all that time. In the 7th moon, the princess stood in the courtyard by a reed fountain, filling a glass with water. Suddenly, a carriage arrived with 6 white horses and silver-clad attendants. A prince stepped out of the carriage, so handsome that she had never seen anyone more beautiful in her life. He asked her for a glass of water. As she handed him the glass she held, he embraced her and lifted her into the carriage. They then drove back out through the gate, across the field towards the pond. "Farewell, maiden fair. Go, beautiful whale's bride." The queen stood at the window and watched the carriage in the distance. When she didn't see her daughter, her heart sank heavily. She called and searched for her everywhere, but she was nowhere to be found. Finally, she knew what had happened and began to weep. The king then revealed to her that a whale had taken her away, and he had promised her to him, which was why he had been so sad. He tried to comfort her and told her about the great wealth they would receive in return, but the queen wanted none of it. She said her only child was dearer to her than all the treasures in the world. While the whale prince had abducted the princess, his servants had brought 3 mighty sacks into the castle. The king found them at the door, and when he opened them, they were full of beautiful large pearl shells, as big as the thickest peas. Suddenly, he was rich again, richer than he had ever been. He redeemed his cities and castles, but he didn't return to a life of luxury. He lived quietly and frugally. Whenever he thought about how his 3 beloved daughters might be faring with the wild animals who might have already devoured them, all his joy vanished. But the queen could not be comforted and shed more tears for her daughter than the whale had given pearls. Finally, it became a little quieter, and after some time, she became happy again because she gave birth to a beautiful boy. And since God had given the child so unexpectedly, he was called Reynold, the Wonder Child. The boy grew up strong and tall, and the queen often told him about his 3 sisters, who were held captive by 3 animals in the enchanted forest. When he was 16 years old, he asked the king for armor and a sword, and when he received them, he wanted to go on adventures, blessed his parents, and set off. He went straight to the enchanted forest and had nothing else in mind but to search for his sisters. At first, he wandered for a long time in the great forest without encountering any person or animal. But after 3 days, he saw a young woman sitting in front of a cave, playing with a young bear. Another very young bear lay on her lap. Reinhold thought, "Surely this is my eldest sister." He left his horse behind and approached her. "Dearest sister, I am your brother Reinhold, and I have come to visit you." The princess looked at him, and seeing that he resembled their father completely, she did not doubt his words, but was alarmed and said, "Oh, dearest brother, hurry and run away as fast as you can if you value your life. My husband, the bear, will come home soon, and if he finds you here, he will devour you mercilessly." But Reinhold replied, "I am not afraid, and I will not leave you until I know how you are faring." Seeing that he was determined, the princess led him into her cave, which was dark and resembled a bear's den. On one side was a pile of leaves and hay where the old bear and his cubs slept. On the other side was a magnificent bed adorned with red fabric and gold, belonging to the princess. She instructed Reinhold to crawl under the bed and handed him some food. It didn't take long before the bear returned home. "I smell human flesh," he growled, trying to stick his thick head under the bed. But the princess called out, "Be quiet! Who would come in here?" "I found and ate a horse in the forest," he grumbled, his snout still bloody. "There must be a human with it, and I smell it," he said, trying once again to reach under the bed. The princess kicked him in the belly, causing him to stagger back to his bed, put his paw in his mouth, and fell asleep. Every 7 days, the bear would assume his human form as a handsome prince, and his cave would transform into a magnificent castle, with the animals in the forest serving as his servants. On such days, he would fetch the princess. Beautiful young women would welcome her outside the castle. It was a splendid feast, and she slept in happiness. But when she woke up, she found herself in a dark bear's den, and her husband had turned back into a bear, grumbling at her feet. Only the bed and everything she touched remained unchanged in its natural state. She lived in sorrow for 6 days, but on the seventh she was comforted. Since she did not age and only counted one day, she was content with her life. She had borne 2 princes to her husband, who were bears for 6 days and human on the seventh. Each time, she filled her bed straw with the finest foods, cakes, and fruits, which sustained her for the whole week, and the bear obeyed her and did as she wished. When Reinhold woke up, he found himself in a silk bed. Servants attended to him and dressed him in the richest clothes, for it was the 7th day. His sister entered with 2 handsome princes and her bear husband, rejoicing in his arrival. Everything was splendid and magnificent, and the entire day was filled with joy and merriment. In the evening, however, the princess said, "Dear brother, now you must leave. At daybreak, my husband will turn back into a bear. And if he finds you here tomorrow, he will not be able to resist his nature and will devour you." Then the bear prince gave him 3 bear hairs and said, "Rub these in times of need, and I will come to your aid." They kissed and bid farewell, and Reinhold got into a carriage drawn by 6 bay horses and departed. Thus he went over hill and dale, through deserts and forests, over nest and hedge, without rest or respite, until toward morning, as the sky began to gray, Reinhold suddenly found himself lying on the ground. His horse and carriage had disappeared, and at dawn he saw 6 ants scurrying along, dragging a nutshell. Reinhold realized that he was still in the enchanted forest and set out to find his second sister. For another 3 days, he wandered fruitlessly in the solitude, but on the 4th day, he heard a great eagle swoop down and settle on a nest. Reinhold hid in the bushes and waited until the eagle flew away again. After 7 hours, it soared back up. Reinhold emerged, approached the tree, and called out, "Dearest sister, are you up there? Let me hear your voice. I am Reinhold, your brother, and I have come to visit you." He heard her call down, "If you are Reinhold, my dearest brother whom I have not yet seen, come up to me." Reinhold tried to climb up, but the trunk was too thick and smooth. He tried 3 times in vain. Then a silk rope ladder fell down, and he quickly climbed up to the eagle's nest, which was sturdy and secure like a balcony on a linden tree. His sister sat under a canopy of rose-colored silk, and on her lap lay an eagle's egg, which she kept warm as if to hatch it. They embraced and rejoiced, But after a while, the princess said, "Now hurry, dearest brother, you must leave. If my husband the eagle sees you, he will pluck out your eyes and devour your heart, as he did to 3 of your servants who sought you in the forest." Reynold replied, "No, I will stay here until your husband is transformed. That will not happen for another 6 weeks, but if you can endure it, hide inside the hollow tree. I will lower food down to you every day." Reynold crawled into the tree, and every day the princess lowered food to him. When the eagle flew away, he would come up to her. After 6 weeks, the transformation occurred, and Reynold woke up again in a bed similar to the one with his bear brother-in-law, only more magnificent. He lived in joy for 7 days with the Eagle Prince. On the 7th evening, they bid farewell. The eagle gave him 3 eagle feathers and said, "Rub these in times of need, and I will come to your aid." Then he sent servants with him to show him the way. But when morning came, they had vanished, leaving Reynold alone in a dreadful wilderness on a high cliff. Reynold looked around and in the distance saw the reflection of a large lake, just catching the first rays of sunlight. He thought of his 3rd sister being there. He began to descend, navigating through bushes and between rocks. 3 days he spent at it, often losing sight of the lake, but on the 4th morning, he reached it. He stood on the shore and called out, "Dearest sister, are you in there? Let me hear your voice. I am Reynold, your brother, and I have come to visit you." But no one answered, and everything was silent. He crumbled breadcrumbs into the water and spoke to the fish. "Dear fish, go to my sister and tell her that Reynold, the wonderkind, is here and wishes to see her." But the red-spotted trout snapped up the bread and paid no heed to his words. Then he saw a boat. He immediately discarded his armor, keeping only his shining sword in hand, and jumped into the ship, rowing away. After a long swim, he saw a chimney made of rock crystal jutting above the water, emitting a pleasant smell. Reynold rowed towards it, thinking, "Surely my sister lives down there." He then seated himself in the chimney and slid down. The princess was startled when she suddenly saw a pair of human legs flailing in the chimney. Soon, a whole man came down and revealed himself as her brother. She rejoiced from the bottom of her heart, but then grew sorrowful and said, "The whale heard that you were coming to find me. He lamented that if you came and he was still a whale, he wouldn't be able to resist devouring you and would shatter my crystal house, causing both of us to perish in the waters." Reynold asked, "Can't you hide me until the time comes when the magic is over?" "Oh no, how could that be possible? Can't you see the walls are all crystal and completely transparent?" She thought and thought. Finally, she remembered the wooden chamber. She cleverly arranged the wood so that nothing could be seen from the outside and concealed the wunderkind inside. Shortly thereafter, the whale arrived, and the princess trembled like a leaf. He circled the crystal house a few times, and when he saw a piece of Reynold's clothing sticking out from the wood, he thrashed his tail and snorted loudly. If he had seen more, he surely would have smashed the house. He came around once a day until finally, in the 7th month, the enchantment ceased. Reynold found himself in a castle that surpassed even the eagles in splendor, situated on a beautiful island. He lived with his sister and her husband in joy for a whole month. When that time was over, the whale gave him 3 scales and said, "Rub these in times of need, and I will come to your aid." Then he let him sail back to shore, where he found his armor once more. The Wonderkind continued on for 7 days in the wilderness, sleeping under the open sky for 7 nights, until it spotted a castle with a steel gate and a mighty lock. In front of it stood a black bull with sparkling eyes, guarding the entrance. Reynold approached and delivered a powerful blow to its neck, but the neck was made of steel, and the sword shattered as if it were glass. He attempted to use his lance, but it bent like a straw, and the bull caught him with its horns, tossing him into the air where he got caught in the branches of a tree. In his distress, Reynold remembered the 3 bear hairs, rubbed them in his hand, and at that moment, a bear came trotting by. It fought with the bull and tore it apart. However, from the bull's belly, a bird of paradise flew out hastily. Reynold then rubbed the 3 eagle feathers. Immediately, a powerful eagle swooped down from the sky and pursued the bird, which fled towards a pond. The eagle shot down upon it, tearing it apart. Reynold had seen it drop a golden egg into the water. He rubbed the 3 fish scales in his hand, and a whale immediately swam up, swallowed the egg, and spit it out onto land. Reinhold took it and cracked it open with a stone, finding a small key inside, the key that opened the steel gate. As soon as he touched the gate with it, it sprang open by itself. He entered, and the bolts on the other doors slid back on their own. Through 7 chambers illuminated brightly, he entered into 7 magnificent chambers. In the last chamber, a maiden lay asleep on a bed. She was so beautiful that he was utterly dazzled. He tried to wake her, but to no avail. She slept as deeply as if dead. In anger, he struck a black tablet standing next to the bed. At that moment, the maiden awoke briefly, but fell back asleep. He took the tablet and smashed it onto the stone floor, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. Hardly had this happened when the maiden's eyes opened brightly, and the spell was broken. She was the sister of Reinhold's 3 brothers-in-law. Because she had refused the love of a wicked sorcerer, he had cast her into a deathly slumber and transformed her brothers into animals. This was to last as long as the black tablet remained intact. Reinhold led the maiden out, and as they approached the gate, his 3 brothers-in-law rode up from 3 directions, now freed. With them were their wives and children, and the eagle bride had hatched the egg, holding a beautiful young lady in her arms. They all returned to the old king and queen, and the wunderkind brought his 3 sisters back home. Soon after, he married the beautiful maiden, and joy and happiness filled every corner. And the cat ran home. My fairy tale is done. The Faithful Animals. Once upon a time, there was a man who didn't have much money left. With what little he had, he set off into the wide world. He came to a village where the children were running around, shouting and making a racket. "What are you up to, children?" said the man. "Oh, we have a mouse here that must dance for us. Look what fun it is. See how it skips around." But the man felt sorry for the poor little creature and said, "Let the mouse go, children, and I will give you money too." So he gave them money, and they let the mouse go, which ran as fast as it could into a hole. The man went on his way and came to another village where the children had a monkey that had to dance and do somersaults, and they laughed at it and didn't leave the animal alone. So the man gave them money too, to let the monkey go. After that, the man came to a third village where the children had a bear that they made dance, and they were pleased when it growled. The man bought the bear's freedom as well, and the bear was happy to be back on its 4 feet and trotted away. Now the man had spent all his remaining money and had not a penny left in his pocket. He said to himself, "The king has so much in his treasury that he doesn't need. I won't starve. I'll take something from there, and when I get money again, I can put it back." So he went to the treasury and took a little of it. But as he was sneaking out, the king's men caught him. They said he was a thief and brought him to trial, where he was sentenced to be set adrift in a box on the water. The lid of the box had holes in it for air, and they gave him a jug of water and a loaf of bread. As he floated on the water, full of fear, he heard something scratching at the lock, gnawing and snorting. Suddenly, the lock sprang open by itself, and the lid lifted up, revealing the mouse, monkey, and bear standing there. They had done it because he had helped them, and now they wanted to help him in return. They didn't know what more to do, so they talked it over. Just then, a white stone came floating on the water, looking like a round egg. The bear said, "That's come at the right time. It's a magic stone. Whoever owns it can wish for whatever they desire." So the man caught the stone, and holding it in his hand, he wished for a castle with a garden and a stable. Almost instantly, he found himself in the castle with the garden and stable, and everything was so beautiful and magnificent that he couldn't believe his eyes. After a while, merchants passed by on their way. "Look," they exclaimed, "what a splendid castle stands here. Last time we passed by, there was nothing but sand." Curious, they went inside and asked the man how he had managed to build everything so quickly. He replied, "I didn't do it. It was my magic stone." "What kind of stone is that?" they asked. So he went and fetched it to show them. The merchants were very interested and asked if it could be traded, offering all their beautiful wares in exchange. The man's eyes were dazzled by the goods, and his heart, being fickle, was deceived into thinking the beautiful goods were worth more than his magic stone, so he gave it away. But as soon as he had let go of the stone, all his luck vanished, and suddenly he found himself again in the closed box floating on the river, with a jug of water and a loaf of bread. The faithful animals, mouse, monkey, and bear, saw his misfortune and came again to help him. But this time, they couldn't even break open the castle because it was much stronger than before. Then the bear said, "We must retrieve the magic stone, or all is lost." Since the merchants were still living in the castle, the animals went together, and when they got close, the bear said, "Mouse, go and peek through the keyhole and see what can be done. You're small, no one will notice you." The mouse agreed, but returned and said, "I can't do it. I looked in. The stone hangs under the mirror on a red ribbon, and on both sides sit a couple of big cats with fiery eyes guarding it." The other said, "Go back in and wait until the master is in bed and asleep. Then sneak in through a hole and crawl onto the bed, pinch his nose, and bite his hair." The mouse went back in and did as the others had said. The master woke up, rubbed his nose, was annoyed, and said, "These cats are good for nothing. They let the mice bite the hair off my head and chased them both away." Thus, the mouse won the game. As soon as the master had fallen asleep again the other night, the mouse crept in, nibbled and gnawed at the red ribbon holding the stone until it snapped and fell down. Then she dragged it to the house door. This made the poor little mouse very angry, and she said to the monkey, who was already on the lookout, "Now you take your paw and pull it all the way out." It was easy for the monkey. He grabbed the stone, and they went together to the river. There, the monkey said, "But how do we get to the box now?" The bear said, "That's easy. I'll go into the water and swim. Monkey, sit on my back, but hold on tight with your hands and take the stone in your mouth. Little mouse, you can sit in my right ear." So they did, and they swam down the river. After a while, the bear grew quiet, started talking, and said, "Listen, monkey, aren't we good comrades? What do you think?" But the monkey didn't answer and remained silent. "Well," said the bear, "won't you give me an answer? That's a bad fellow who doesn't respond." When the monkey heard this, he opened his mouth, dropped the stone into the water, and said, "I couldn't answer. I had the stone in my mouth. Now it's gone, and it's all your fault." "Stay calm," said the bear. "We'll think of something." They consulted and called the frogs, toads, and all the creatures living in the water, saying, "A powerful enemy is coming. Gather many stones, and we'll build a wall to protect you." The animals were frightened and dragged stones from all directions. Finally, an old fat bullfrog surfaced from the depths with the red ribbon and the magic stone in its mouth. When the bear saw this, he was pleased. "Now we have what we need." He took the burden from the frog, told the animals it was all good, and bid them farewell. Then the three went down to the man in the box, used the stone to break the lid, and arrived just in time. He had already finished the bread and drunk the water and was nearly starving. But when he held the stone in his hands again, he wished himself fresh and healthy, back in his beautiful castle with the garden and stable. He lived happily, and the three animals stayed with him and had a good life forever after. The Crows. There was an honest soldier who had earned and saved some money through hard work, unlike his comrades who squandered theirs in taverns. Two of his comrades, however, had deceitful hearts and wanted to rob him of his money. Outwardly, they pretended to be friendly. One day they said to him, "Listen, why should we stay in this town? It feels like we're trapped here, like prisoners. Especially someone like you could earn a decent living and live happily at home." They persisted with such talk until he finally agreed to run away with them. However, the two others had nothing else in mind but to take his money from him outside the town. After they had gone a distance, the two said, "We should turn right here if we want to reach the border." "No way. That just leads back into town. We should go left to go further." "Why are you being so stubborn?" they shouted, pressing him, hitting him until he fell down, and taking his money from his pockets. But that wasn't enough. They also gouged out his eyes, dragged him to the gallows, and tied him firmly to it. Then they left him there and returned to town with the stolen money. The poor blind man didn't know where he was, feeling around and realizing he was sitting under a wooden beam. He thought it was a cross and said, "It's good of them to at least tie me under a cross. God is with me," and began to pray earnestly to God. As night approached, he heard something fluttering. It was 3 crows that settled on the beam. He then heard one say, "Sister, what good news do you bring? If only people knew what we know. The princess is sick, and the old king has promised her hand to whoever can heal her. But no one can, because she will only recover if the toad in that pond is burnt to ash and she drinks the ashes." Then the second crow said, "Yes, if only people knew what we know. Tonight, dew will fall from the sky, so wonderful and healing. Whoever is blind and applies it to their eyes will regain their sight." Finally, the third crow said, "Yes, if only people knew what we know. The toad can only help one person, and the dew only a few. But there is great need in the city. All the wells have dried up, and no one knows that the large square stone in the market must be removed and dug underneath, where the most beautiful water springs forth." After the crows spoke, they flew away, and the blind man gradually freed himself from his bonds. He bent down, plucked a few blades of grass, and applied the dew that had fallen on them to his eyes. Immediately, his sight returned, and he could see the moon and stars in the sky, realizing he was standing next to the gallows. He then collected as much of the precious dew as he could find and went to the pond, where he dug out the water and retrieved the toad. He burned it to ash and took it to the king's court. There, he had the princess drink the ashes, and when she was healed, he demanded her hand in marriage as promised. However, the king was displeased with him because of his ragged clothes. He said that anyone who wanted his daughter's hand must first bring water to the city, hoping to rid himself of the soldier. Undeterred, the soldier instructed the people to remove the square stone in the market and dig underneath. They did so and soon discovered a beautiful spring with abundant water. Unable to refuse him any longer, the king gave his daughter to the soldier in marriage, and they lived happily together. Once, as he was strolling through the fields, he encountered his 2 former comrades who had acted so treacherously towards him. They did not recognize him, but he immediately recognized them. He approached them and said, "Look, here is your former comrade, whose eyes you shamefully gouged out. But by God's grace, fortune has smiled upon me." They fell at his feet, begging for mercy. Because he had a kind heart, he took pity on them, brought them along, and provided them with food and clothes. He then told them how he had fared and how he had achieved his current honors. Upon hearing this, the 2 could not rest and decided to sit under the gallows one night to see if they might also hear something good. As they sat under the gallows, something soon fluttered above their heads, and the 3 crows arrived. One crow said to the others, "Listen, sisters, someone must have overheard us. The princess is well, the toad is gone from the pond, a blind man has regained his sight, and they have dug a fresh well in the city. Come, let's search. Perhaps we will find him." They fluttered down and found the 2 men. Before they could defend themselves, the crows perched on their heads and pecked out their eyes. They continued pecking at their faces until they were dead. They lay there under the gallows. When the crows did not return after a few days, their former comrade wondered where they might have wandered off to. He went out to search for them, but found nothing but their bones. He carried their remains away from the gallows and laid them to rest in a grave. 33. The Lazy One and the Industrious One. Once upon a time, there were 2 apprentice craftsmen who traveled together and vowed to stick together. However, when they arrived in a large city, one of them, called Brother Lazy, became dissolute. He forgot his promise, abandoned his companion, and went off on his own, seeking pleasure wherever he could find it. The other apprentice stayed true to his word, worked diligently, and continued his journey. One night, he passed by a gallows without knowing it, but on the ground below, he saw someone lying there, sleeping. The person was poor and naked, and because it was starlit, he recognized his former companion. He lay down beside him, covered him with his cloak, and fell asleep. Before long, he was awakened by 2 voices conversing. They belonged to 2 ravens perched atop the gallows. One raven said, "God provides." The other replied, "Act accordingly." One of the ravens then fell weakly to the ground after speaking, while the other remained by its side, waiting until daybreak. Then it fetched some worms and water, refreshed the fallen raven, and revived it from death. The 2 apprentice craftsmen were amazed by what they witnessed. They asked the sick raven why the other raven had been so wretched and sickly. The sick raven replied, "Because I didn't want to do anything and believed that sustenance came from heaven." The two craftsmen took the ravens with them to the nearest village. One raven was lively and foraged for its food, bathing every morning and grooming itself with its beak. The other raven, however, sat in corners, was moody, and always looked disheveled. After some time, the daughter of the household, who was a beautiful girl, grew fond of the industrious raven. She picked him up from the ground, stroked him with her hand, and eventually pressed him to her face and kissed him with joy. The bird fell to the ground, rolled around, fluttered, and transformed into a handsome young man. He then explained that the other raven was his brother, and both had offended their father, who had cursed them, saying, "Fly as ravens until a beautiful girl kisses you willingly." Thus, one was redeemed, but no one wanted to kiss the lazy raven, and he died as a raven. Brother Lazy took this as a lesson, became diligent and orderly, and stayed with his companion. 36. The Long Nose. There were 3 old discharged soldiers who were so old that they couldn't even bite into leftover milk bread. The king sent them away without a pension, leaving them with nothing to live on, forcing them to beg. They traveled through a vast forest, unable to find its end. When evening came, 2 of them fell asleep, and the third had to keep watch to protect them from wild animals. As the 2 slept, and the third stood watch, a little man in red clothing approached and called out, "Who goes there?" "Good friend," said the soldier. "What kind of good friend?" "3 old discharged soldiers who have nothing to live on." The little man said he should come to him. He would give him something, and if he followed his instructions, he would have plenty for the rest of his life. The soldier approached, and the little man gave him an old cloak. When he wore it and made a wish, it would come true. However, he was told not to tell his comrades until daybreak. When morning came and they woke up, he told them what had happened. They continued traveling until the second evening, whereupon the second soldier kept watch while the other 2 slept. The little red man arrived again, asking, "Who goes there?" "Good friend." "What kind of good friend?" 3 old discharged soldiers. The little man gave him an old pouch that would never empty of money, no matter how much was taken out. Like the first soldier, he was instructed to keep this gift a secret until daybreak. They traveled through the forest for a third day, and at night the third soldier stood guard. The little red man appeared once more and asked, "Who goes there?" "Good friend." "What kind of good friend?" 3 old discharged soldiers. The little man gave him a horn that, when blown, would gather all peoples together. In the morning, each soldier used his gift. The first put on the cloak and wished to be out of the forest, and immediately they were outside. They went to an inn and ordered the best food and drink the innkeeper could provide. When they finished, the soldier with the pouch paid for everything without taking a penny from the innkeeper. 36. The Long Nose. They were tired of traveling, and the one with the pouch said to the one with the cloak, "I wish you would wish us a castle there. We have enough money. We could live like princes." So he wished for a castle, and instantly it appeared, complete with all its furnishings. After living there for a while, he wished for a carriage with 3 gray horses, so they could travel to another kingdom and pass themselves off as 3 royal sons. They departed with a grand retinue of servants, making a princely appearance. They arrived at a king's court who had only 1 daughter, and upon their arrival, they announced themselves and were invited to dine and spend the night. They enjoyed themselves thoroughly, eating, drinking, and playing cards, which the princess enjoyed very much. She played cards with the soldier who had the pouch, and as much as she won from him, she saw that his pouch never emptied, suspecting it was a magical object. She suggested he was warm from the game and should drink some wine, secretly adding a sleeping potion. As soon as he drank it, he fell asleep. The princess then took his pouch, went to her chamber, sewed a similar-looking one, put some money in it, and replaced the original. The next morning, the 3 soldiers continued their journey. When the one with the pouch tried to retrieve more money, he found it empty and remained empty. He cried out, "My pouch has been swapped by the false princess. Now we are poor." However, the one with the cloak reassured him, saying, "Don't worry, I'll get it back soon. He put on the cloak, wished himself into the princess's chamber, and appeared instantly. She was counting the money she had continuously taken from the pouch. When she saw him, she screamed, accusing him of being a robber, which alarmed the entire court, causing them to rush in to capture him. In his haste to escape, he jumped out the window, leaving behind his cloak and disappearing. When the three reunited, they had nothing left except the horn. The owner of the horn said, "I will help. We will start a war," and blew the horn, summoning so many hussars and cavalry that they couldn't all be counted. He sent a message to the king, demanding the return of the pouch and cloak, threatening to raise his castle if they were not returned. The king pleaded with his daughter to hand them over to avoid disaster, but she refused, insisting on trying something else first. Dressing as a poor girl with a basket on her arm, she went out to the army camp to sell various drinks, accompanied by her chambermaid. When she began to sing so beautifully in the middle of the camp, the entire army came out of their tents to listen, including the one who possessed the horn. Seeing him there, she signaled to her chambermaid, who sneaked into his tent, took the horn, and ran back to the castle with it. Then she returned home, now in possession of everything, while the three comrades had to go back to begging. So they went their separate ways. The one who had the pouch said, "You know what? We can't always be together. You go that way, I'll go this way." He went alone and entered a forest, where he grew tired and lay down under a tree to rest. When he woke up and looked above him, he saw a beautiful apple tree under which he had slept, adorned with magnificent apples. Hungry, he took one apple and ate it, then another. Suddenly, his nose began to grow and continued growing until it was so long that he couldn't get up anymore. It extended through the forest and stretched out for 60 miles beyond. Meanwhile, his companions traveled the world searching for him because they preferred being together, but they couldn't find him. Suddenly, one of them stumbled upon something and stepped on something soft. "What could this be?" he thought. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a nose. They decided to follow the nose and eventually reached their friend in the forest, lying there unable to move. They took a pole, wrapped it around the long nose, and tried to lift him up to carry him away, but he was too heavy. They found a donkey in the forest, placed him and the long nose on two poles, and thus managed to transport him. After dragging him a short distance, they grew tired and had to rest. While resting, they noticed a tree nearby, laden with beautiful pears. Behind the tree emerged the little red man who told the long-nosed one to eat one of the pears, and his nose would fall off. He did so, and immediately his long nose fell off, leaving him as he was before. The little man then advised him, "Collect apples and pears. Make powder from each. Whoever you give the apple powder to will grow a nose, and when you give them pear powder, it will fall off again. Then travel as a doctor, give the princess some of the apples and then the powder. Her nose will grow 20 times longer than yours did, but hold on tight." Taking the apples, he went to the royal court and presented himself as a gardener's apprentice, claiming to have a type of apple that grew nowhere else in the kingdom. When the princess heard about this, she asked her father to buy her some of these apples. The king agreed, saying, "Buy as many as you like." She bought and ate one, which tasted so good to her that she thought she had never eaten such a good one in her life, and then ate another. When that happened, the doctor left. Then her nose began to grow and grew so much that she could not get up from the chair, but fell over. The nose grew 60 ells around the table, 60 around her cupboard, and then through the window 100 ells around the castle, and 20 more miles out into the city. There she lay, unable to move or budge, and no doctor knew how to help her. The old king had it announced that if any stranger could help his daughter, he should have much money. Now the old soldier had been waiting for this, and presented himself as a doctor. If it be God's will, he would help her. He then gave her powder made from the apples, and her nose began to grow anew and became even larger. In the evening, he gave her powder made from the pears, and it became a little smaller, but not much. The next day, he gave her apple powder again to frighten and punish her properly, and it grew again much more than it had diminished yesterday. Finally, he said, "Most gracious princess, you must have stolen something once. If you do not give it back, no remedy will help. She said, "I know nothing about it." He said, "It is so, otherwise my powder would help, and if you do not give it back, you must die from the long nose." Then the old king said, "Give back the purse, the mantle, and the horn that you stole, otherwise your nose can never get any smaller." So the chambermaid had to fetch all three items and lay them down, and he gave her powder made from the pears, and the nose fell off, and 250 men had to come and cut it to pieces. And he left with the purse, the mantle, and the horn to join his comrades, and they wished themselves back into their castle. There they are likely to sit and keep house.